Hiya there. Today we're going to look at a 10-mark describe question, and that 10-mark describe question is describe 2 changes to childhood since the 1950s. And I'm going to take you through how I would answer the question, as well as what content I would put in there as well. There will be a writing framework towards the end of the presentation video that you are able to use if you wish to. So to start with, obviously a 10-mark question, we're going to be looking to be using between 3 and 4 paragraphs. It is a describe question, so go into detail rather than explanation, using examples where possible. You want to be spending an exam between 10 and 15 minutes on the question, and looking to be using around 200 words. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to give you some top tips to include for this particular question. And the top tips include, I would select 2 particular changes, okay, and then focus on each one separately, i.e. your paragraph structure. So 1 paragraph on 1 change and your 2nd paragraph on another. Write about what things were like in the 1950s and then describe what things are like today. So there will be a contrasting element to it, and I'll bring that into maybe your final paragraph as well as within your paragraphs of writing. You do not need to say why things have changed, but write about how things are different. Okay, so that's a key thing. And as always in an exam question, make sure you use sociological language throughout, and I'll give you some ideas around that later on in the presentation. So to start with, we're going to look at the question, and the first paragraph that I would look at is describing what childhood actually is. Okay, so child is that period in your life when you are dependent on your parents. In the 1950s, childhood lasted a much shorter time than now. Most children left school at 15 and were expected to start work and help support the family immediately. Now people can depend on their parents beyond the time when they are legally adults. So basically I would summarise what childhood is, and the key bit there, but it has changed quite a lot since the 1950s, and like I said, most children left school at 15, okay, to support families, so that is a big change. So the first paragraph I would say, what is childhood? Okay, your next paragraph I would look at describing how childhood, what childhood would have been like in the 1950s. So just going on to speak about the average number of children in a family in the 1950s was 2.4. Mothers were generally younger when they started to have children and had more of them. Mothers would generally not have worked outside of the home except doing work such as cleaning or cooking. Homes were less well heated. They had fewer televisions and no computers. Children often had fewer toys and spent more time outside playing with their friends, as there was no room inside the house. Okay, family discipline was often very harsh, and as you can see in the image there, children playing on the streets, playing football on the street. Other examples may include hopscotch. Particularly in my childhood, what games have come from games such as track 'em or dobby, hide and seek. I know children within school aren't supposed to, but often caught playing flicks involving coins, marbles. All these games are key times within the 1950s, but children played to occupy their time. And like it says, the families were a lot stricter in terms of discipline. So again, 1950s, that gives a summary of what childhood was like in the 1950s. I would then go on to talk about what childhood is like now. So what is your childhood like today? And the image you can see in front of you is from my childhood actually, and it is the introduction of computer games. I didn't actually play a lot of computer games, but one game I did particularly enjoy was Paperboy, which is where you went along the road and threw papers into someone's door, and I used to love that game as a child. So the introduction of computer games brought children from the outside to the inside. I did spend a lot of time within my childhood building dens, climbing trees, things like that. So they're all childhood memories. Okay, so what you're going to talk about now. Sue Palmer, a writer, claims that modern children have a higher risk of mental health problems, obesity, limited opportunity for play and limited freedom. She calls this a toxic childhood. Okay, so she talks about basically nowadays children are more at risk of obesity and mental health illnesses. Purely in her mind, she believes that children are staying in more, and therefore this is causing obesity problems such as computer games. Children aren't as active. Okay, and she talks about this as toxic childhood. Parents control children excessively because of fears of perhaps paedophiles and stranger danger, which I remember from when I was at school, and the possibility of a child being abducted or murdered. And obviously this is remarkably rare, but there is new fears within communities that parents are in fear, and there is more control. Parents are more controlling over their children and don't let them probably do as much as they would have done in the 1950s, purely because of the dangers that is around, as I've spoke earlier, and maybe that then links into media, how the media portrays it, in particular looking at moral panics and deviancy amplification, keywords there that you could discuss, but you know, parents are in fear of what is around their children. So then we'll look at the focus on safety and care of children is known as being child-centred. So people, like I said, parents are more child-centred around looking after their children. As a result, children are required to stay in and play computer games rather than going to parks and playing ball games, as you can see in the other pictures. They eat processed foods in homes as parents have limited time to cook. Okay, children do not talk to adults as much as they should, and they are often pushed. And awareness of fashion is directed from the media. So media plays a big impact now, and obviously the use of Twitter, Facebook. Children want the latest things, and therefore maybe a little bit more demanding than they were in the 50s. It talks there about processed food. Children eat more processed food purely because parents haven't got as much time to cook. From my own experience, I'm sure it's from a lot of you guys reading this or listening to this. My parents always had correct meals, meat and 2 veg sort of meals, and didn't give processed food, and both parents work full time. So it is a little bit stereotypical that, but what they're saying is that more parents working has resulted in the processed food industry being more frequent within the household. Other areas what I'm going to talk about is the exam system is another form of pressure that adds to children, and it results in parents and schools pressurising children to do well rather than relax and enjoy learning on its own. Particularly now at school, there's a huge focus within school, but children should be getting themselves educated, and there's a lot of pressure on children to do well within school, and that obviously comes from parents as well. So I would talk about what childhood is like now, and I would particularly look at key words and key terms such as the toxic child that Sue Palmer talks about. The possibilities of abduction has become more hyped within the media through moral panics and deviance amplification, which has resulted in parents being very child-centred around their children and making sure that they are safe. And the other area you can discuss is processed foods. So processed foods are more available now for parents to use, and it's saying, or stereotypically saying, that less parents actually cook than they did in the 1950s. So like I say, what I would do within this assignment, I would look at 4 paragraphs possibly. Firstly, what childhood means. Secondly, childhood in the 1950s, what it was like. Your third paragraph will be looking at what childhood is like today. And then finally, you can then do some major differences in a final paragraph if you don't include it in your second and third paragraph. So, hope this video supports. Best of luck. Thank you very much.